what really is the focus is that rate of savings because we have the biggest grasp and the biggest control over that, which is really what all of us want in the financial world. It's certainty.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. This is the Money Mavericks podcast. I'm your host, Matt Linico.
And I'm Michael Worthmuller.
Today, we want to run you guys through the topic of cash flow and savings.
Cash flow and savings, very important concept,
Yeah.
especially for people our age. Especially important given the credit card usage that has been frequent for the American population. A lot of us has been relying a lot more on credit card usage
Yeah.
than past, my parents, the generations before that. And it's becoming a real issue
Yeah.
now.
I mean, it's all those great deals they offer you on those credit cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I have one for United. So I get to earn all these points towards flights and towards
Yep.
purchases through United by using this credit card. So typically, when I go out and I'm doing stuff, instead of using my debit card, I end up throwing that down
It's easy.
because I'm thinking I'm getting all these perks out of it.
It's easy. You get the cash flow
Yeah.
back. So I know I get the same thing. The problem is though that there's really no strategy for getting those paid back in a
Yeah.
timely manner. And again, they're back of the head, back of mind. So it's not really, a priority for us. A lot of resorts and
Yeah.
hotels we go to now, they don't even accept cash. They give you that card, and they
Yep.
say spend whatever you want, we'll give you a bill at the end. And that's great because you don't even think about the money. You just
You're just
plastic here,
swiping and
plastic there.
swiping and swiping.
Yeah, so
And
it's become a real issue, and we've even seen it looking back at the savings rate in the U.S. It's averaging pretty low, around 5 or 6%, and the most recent spike that has occurred, believe it or not, was during COVID-19. And you may be wondering why, but when you think back, it was a big time of
yeah,
uncertainty. A lot of people
yeah.
were scared.
We had curfew, so you weren't really able to go out, especially late. So, we weren't for those, younger crowd, we weren't going out to the bars and
Yeah,
doing all that on weekends because we weren't able to. A lot of
yeah.
establishments were closed.
Yep. So a combination of not going out, sure there was the online shopping, but really what also led was the fear. People were
Yeah,
unsure what the future held. People were stocking on toilet paper, were storing food. Some people were getting the basement reserve building up.
yeah,
So there was a real fear during that time. And the fear is what led people to save a lot more money in case they needed it. The issue now is that we're out of COVID, everything's kind of returned a little bit to normal, and savings has dropped to an all-time low in the US. It's
yeah,
down to like 3 or 4% now for the
yeah.
year.
And when we think about that number, that 3 or 4%, a lot of the times, most of that, if not all of that 3 to 4%, is just what we're saving in 401ks and retirement plans.
Correct.
When we think about what money we're able to push towards saving, sometimes there isn't much left over after we go live our life and pay our expenses. And it's just what we had taken out, that 4 or 5% that we're contributing to our retirement account. And that's all we're able to save.
Yeah. Now look, it's not too big of an issue for people our age because we're kind of in that invincibility era where we feel like we get fired, we go to work somewhere else,
Yep.
we can make more money, we have time. If the market does bad, we'll just, we'll wait for the come up. And that is all true. That's great. But at some point, there does become a time where now it becomes more of a chase rather than
Yep.
a goal we're reaching. So
Absolutely.
so really, even with the 3 or 4% we're saving, even if it's all going to retirement, what's really for us at the end? What do we have to look forward to, and what's are they reaching our goals? That savings rate. So
Yep.
we're actually doing a bit of a different presentation for you all. You may see a little bit of Matt's computer poking out the camera there. He has his laptop in front of him. We have a screen right here in front of us. So if we're looking down, just excuse us.
Yep.
But we're going to be using some software we use here at CNET Financial. It's called Living Balance Sheet. What it does is
Yep.
it lets us project different measurements, different scores, and different tables and
Yeah.
data.
Helps us put some numbers to all these topics and things that we kind of talk about with clients so that you can get more of a visual aspect to it.
Yeah, so we're going to paint you the story, but we're going to paint it with real numbers so that we're not just blowing smoke.
Yeah.
So Matt's going to put that up for us. And right now we're taking a case study, someone who's around our age, let's say they're 25 or 30, study period for 30 years, so retiring around 65 retirement age. And right now we're just focusing on one person earning $100,000. And really we're saying, let's take a look at this in the long run
Yeah.
and see how this looks.
And we're going to touch, as you see, this little income rate. Obviously, if you're earning $100,000 today, in 10 years, if you're earning that same $100,000 in that job, you might think something's wrong. You might want to move on.
Yeah.
Typically, you get annual raises of maybe 2, 3%. And every once in a while, you might get a promotion where you see a much bigger jump in your salary. But over that 30 years, we kind of average it out to around 4% annual increases in that salary.
Correct. So let's see what this $100,000 over the course of 30 years brings us with a 4% rate increasing salary. And that's a pretty hefty number right there.
Let me see.
This
So through those 30 years, you earned $5.6 million.
kudos to you. That is quite the accomplishment. How do you feel?
Yeah, I
Excellent,
mean,
I'm
I'd
sure.
feel
I
great
feel
if I
pretty
was sitting
good
there
too,
with
right?
$5.6
You
million
think 5
for
million,
sure.
5 million's enough to retire on, I'd say.
Absolutely.
I only settle for one boat, but that's okay. All right, so let's be realistic here. We're earning all this money throughout the course of 30 years. Obviously, we're going to come here and knock, and that's going to be Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam's going to want his share of the cut because we live in this great country. All is fair. Let's assume right now we have a 30% rate of tax. That's including federal, state, and municipal, by the way. So let's see what we're
That's
looking
all
at
in.
now.
And so all of a sudden you see some red in here
Yeah.
and what's coming out. So that 5.6 drops all the way down to 3.9.
Yes, Uncle Sam needs his million. That's fair. We gotta pay Uncle Sam. But that's not all that we face, especially as young advisors and
Yeah.
young people like ourselves. We have debt. Now, for young people like us, that's most likely student debt, probably a car that you have, you're paying off your parents' car still, you have that debt,
Yeah.
car insurance, and then as we get older, maybe you just bought a house.
Yeah, you got a mortgage.
Yeah. Mortgage. We have kids now, if you're young kids and you have debt growing there. So we will always have debt we're paying off. Let's assume 25% for now. Again, these are all just numbers for just painting a picture. And that's going to take another chunk out. Looks like another $1 million.
hefty little chunk there.
Yeah.
And so
we still got 2.5, looks like, right?
2.5.
Numbers a little
Still
small on our
feeling pretty
screen.
good.
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Still happy. Maybe I'll still get the boat. We'll see.
I might have to get a little bit of a smaller boat.
Yeah. But this is also all assuming that we made all this money and then we put it under our bed and that we never spent a dime and that we never got hungry and that we never enjoyed seeing friends and never enjoyed going to concerts and yada, yada, yada.
But
that's not
what happens.
That's not true.
We like to go live our lives, go on vacation, go out with friends. We need to eat. We need to buy groceries. These things are going to happen.
We need a reason to go to work and make $100,000 essentially. We can't
we typically see this being the largest chunk that most people end up spending. And so, we talked about that annual savings rate, the average savings rate of being around 3-5%.
Yeah. So with the 40% lifestyle, you'll see the bottom left there once he calculates the annual savings.
So we get that.
Assuming about the 5% that we discuss is the annual savings rate now in the US.
And now,
what do we end up with?
You look to this right, and it's almost all red.
It's not good.
Definitely not a pretty picture anymore. We went from this big green bar of 5.6 million to all of a sudden now, after 30 years, you might only be left with 280,000.
Yeah. So how are we feeling now? How are we feeling for retirement? Pretty solid?
I wouldn't be.
Yeah. It's unless inflation went backwards in those 30 years, then I'm not feeling too good either. And unfortunately, that's just the realistic situation that a lot of us are in right now, where we're only putting away 4 or 5% just out of, it's out of our mind, subconsciously put it into a 401k through to work, no problem, just whatever gets me the matching contribution, and then we forget it. And this is the problem if we forget it, is that at one point there's going to be a chase versus us actually accumulating and wanting to save up for a specific number for our goals.
Absolutely.
Right. So with this being said, this is something that needs to be addressed.
Right? Now, on top of that, obviously, like you mentioned, we're probably not putting all our money just under the bed, under the mattress, and letting it sit there.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people, especially nowadays, there was the big crave of high yield savings where you could get a decent return by just putting your money in the savings account, earning interest.
Yep.
There's investments that you can put your money into, whether it's bonds or stocks, where you're going to grow your money and not just let it sit stagnant.
Correct. Yep. Especially for young advisors and young people like us. There's the stock market. We're a little more risk acceptant of risk because we're so young. We have time to recover. So yeah, we will be making money on our money, right?
Yeah,
ideally.
And so, we have this is say after tax, you're earning a rate of return of around 5%.
So you're still saving 5% and you're there thinking, all right, I'm just going to put my money in the stock market. I'll earn my interest and that'll help me get through retirement, right?
That 5% is a pretty modest return.
Pretty modest after tax,
doing pretty decent. So, you end up growing a little bit more.
Still a lot of red.
Still a lot of red.
Still a lot of red. But in fact, compounding it just let them take more money from us because they get compounded how much
this
they
red probably grew a little bit, but we also, after 30 years, you doubled your money.
We doubled our money. So now we're at 500,000. What do we say, folks? We put the hat down, we retire?
I think I might have to keep working a few more years.
Just a little bit, maybe for 70. It's so the rate of return does help, but it's not the end all be all. And you may be wondering why that is. So in our business, we've come to the realization that there's really three R's that you really have to focus on. The three R's are your rate of savings, your rate of return, and your rate of distribution. Right. So rate of savings, obviously what we're talking about now is how much you're able to keep in your pocket after your spending and after your both needs and your wants, how much you're able to save in the bank
And
or
right
how
now
much
we
you're able
got
to put
that
into 401k,
5%.
which is 5% right now, so not good. However, this is the one we can control the most because this is what's on our end. We have a little control over the lifestyle, a little control over the debt and how we pay it. We'll touch more on that in a second. The other two R's are rate of return, which, Matt, as we saw, does
Yeah.
not affect much.
And it's also something that we have almost no control over.
Correct. If you take a historical look at the S&P, which is what most people look at for market returns, long term it averages well and it averages around, 8% or so, but it is quite volatile. There's plenty of years with below 20% returns, plenty of years with below 10% returns, and vice versa. There's years that you get 10, 20, 30% returns on the S&P.
And there's years you might go down 10%. So it's
Yeah.
Obviously the risk you're willing to take and understanding that in any given year, you don't have the ability to control whether your money is going to go up or down. You know, Traditionally it has gone up, but we can't rely on that. We can't
Correct.
make any pro. And even let's say, well, we'll look at this a little bit more. This rate of return, we said 5. Let's say you did a bit better. After tax, you earned 8, which is great. That's better than the average
Yeah,
because
that's
that
10%
means
for
you're
tax.
probably doing better than 10%, but then you're getting hit with those taxes, bringing it down to 8. Still a ton of red. And, that number jumps up. We have 900,000 now going into
Yeah.
retirement.
Not even a million. And that's with a very, very high rate of return that most likely will not be able to attain.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's just you're leading with fear still. You have the fear of not making that return and that uncertainty of if it doesn't hit, what happens next.
Yeah.
So out of our control, uncertainty, not ideally the way to go. The other thing I will say is the 5% is conservative. Rate of returns change over time. And we're talking about a 30-year runway for most of us, or just about 30 years before retirement. Now, my mentor here, his name is Dave Suki. When he was getting started in the business about 20 years ago, he was seeing fixed income at around 10%, 11%, and people weren't buying them because the market was doing that well. So the percentages and the interest here, it's all relative to the time that you're in,
Yeah.
and it's all relative to change. So all that being said is that out of the three rates, the rate of return is really not in our power much either. And the third one we mentioned is rate of distribution. That will be taken into account later on when we have the asset and we begin retirement, how we distribute those funds out. So we won't be talking about that much this episode, but you can think of rate of distribution as if you had $1 million in retirement, would you rather be getting 8% dripped out of there and having that asset saved for 5%? And there's different ways to approach that.
Yeah.
So again, a little control there, but not as much. What really is the focus is that rate of savings because we have the biggest grasp and the biggest control over that, which is really what all of us want in the financial world. It's certainty.
Absolutely.
So what is the problem here and how do we address it?
Yeah. I want to look at one more thing as we're kind of
Yeah, so let's
touching.
let's put a face and a name for you all, shall we, instead of viewers?
Yeah.
So now
So we
you're
got Mr. and Miss Net Income.
Mr. and Mrs. Net Income. How do
You
you
have
do?
these dual incomes netting out to about that 100,000. We see that 5%. And as you can see, we have that rate of return on here.
Yep, the same 5% conservative. The
We're hitting
same,
that same
yep,
number.
5%. So 5% still savings, as you can see, the $95,000 burn rate, Mr. and Mrs. Income, which is you, or Mrs. and Miss Net Income, earning $100,000. So just another way to illustrate how even 30 years, if you're a couple and you're earning this, it does not save you a lot for retirement. So how do we address this? What's the solution here? Well, let's take a look at how the traditional approach to retiring and how savings looks and compare it to how we think we can make it a bit more efficient.
So, yeah. So, obviously we have our income, that $100,000. In between this little drip to your checking account, that direct deposit, you're going to pay your taxes, you're going to pay into your benefits. Those things are going to come out. We know that those are all pre-tax. That's kind of set in stone. And then we talked about this lifestyle. we have our bills that we pay. We want to go out, we want to enjoy our life. And so at the end, then, we might have a certain amount that we're able to put into a savings.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't, we might set, hey, I want to put $250 a month going there. But, your expenses are driving that out. Maybe some months you're not able to do that 250. So,
Yeah, a lot of times this leads a residual sweep, as I like to call it, where you'll be earning your monthly income. And at the end of the month, you're like, all right, I want to put some in savings, and whatever's left that you think you can
yeah,
put over, you push over. Problem is, there's really no measurement to that. You're really not keeping score. Each month it may be different if you're going out more one month and another. So there's really no measurement and no practice and no repetition about how you're regularly saving income. And that leads to some of these typical management failures. You're saving by decision. You have to manually remember to
yeah,
save and move that out of the checking account so that it's not there to be tempted
yeah.
to use for short-term spending.
And so one of the things that we do a lot, with our clients is we make a little bit of an interruption, just a slight interruption to the system to kind of change the way you think about saving. And what that ends up looking like is we add this one extra account. Ooh, clicked a little too fast. Now, again, your taxes are going to come out, your benefits are going to come out. And then instead of that money being direct deposited into a checking account, we're going to look at how having it deposited into what we call a wealth building or wealth coordination account can help change the way you're able to save money over time.
Yeah. And this doesn't have to be complicated. A wealth building account is really just another account that you allocate money towards before it enters your main spending account. So it could
Yeah.
be a savings account at your bank. It could be like an account here that we help and manage and watch for scores. Or it can be an account like a money market that you hold somewhere else. Either way, all it is a misdirection from where your salary hits this account and then goes to your spending account, likely with a smaller amount or with a burn rate that you know how much you need to spend. This lets the
Yeah.
savings become unconscious.
Yeah, and it allows us to be more conscious of how we're spending and what we're spending. So
Correct.
now that we're kind of thinking about that topic of, being more conscious about how we're spending, what we're looking at in this accumulation phase, we're going to come back to this calculator we were looking at before. Drop that back to the 5%. So as we know, that 566 and what we can do to kind of increase that rate of savings instead of focusing on a rate of return that we might not be able to achieve.
Correct. So let's say for taxes, we're seeing 30% taxes. What if we did some tax planning there where we helped make sure your income didn't break the next barrier for the taxes? What if we did some additional tax strategies where we took out investment gains and losses and made sure that we were tax efficient with those and we lowered that by,
Yeah,
2%.
2%.
Yeah.
We talk about debt. Maybe we're able to help you with the student loans, the credit card debt, the mortgages, helping you pay that down over time and be a little bit more efficient in that manner of how you're paying debt and then reducing that on the balance sheet,
Mhm.
where now you bring that down to, let's say, 22%.
Correct. And even lifestyle, obviously we're not here to change your lifestyle or tell you things that you shouldn't do. That's not something we advise.
Yeah.
But let's say that we help you be more aware of what you're spending. And maybe you see some inefficiencies in your spending and you're able to cut back. And maybe we can save a few
Yeah.
percent,
And
maybe.
this is one of the more controllable ones that we have
Mhm.
is controlling our lifestyle and controlling our expenses and how we spend. And let's say we were able to bring that down a little bit to 35, a little 5% change.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you're getting to see more green. And it's not because we increase this rate of return. In fact, we're able to increase that even more by just focusing on saving more money, having that more modest return. And over the long run, over that 30 years, you're seeing this number jump up a lot more than what focusing on getting that high rate of return was looking like.
Yeah. Something much more comfortable in retirement, 1.6, 1.7 million versus just having a high rate of return and keeping savings low and just hoping that the rate of return increases and keeps us to retirement safely. So really the savings rate is really what the goal and what the focus should be because the control is there. You're able to put a process and a strategy in
Yeah.
place there and able to actually measure it over time.
Yeah. And as we kind of continue, got to skip through a little bit here, get back to where we were.
Yeah, so as you said, it makes it become a conscious awareness of how you're spending. Again, it's not affecting the lifestyle as in you should be cutting things, you should be budgeting yourself, but more of a, well, let's sweep this much into checking and keep the savings on the back burner so it's saving automatically for us. We don't even
Yeah.
have to move it in there.
Yeah, you're gonna sit there and you not even realize how much money you might be saving just focusing on what the spending is. And then over time, when you look back, you're like, wow, there could be a wow factor, as we
Yeah.
thought that, you went from 566 to 1.6 by just adjusting, being more tax efficient, being more efficient with debt, controlling my expenses a little bit more and how I spend my money.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, I saw a much more significant jump by being more conscious about that aspect of my life versus just focusing on, oh, how much can I save after I do everything?
Correct. Yeah.
And so, we have some of these, what we're able to do with the wealth building accounts, how you can kind of, we talk about that, rate of return, not letting your money sit, the things you can kind of do to earn that 5% and what you're doing there, tax efficiency, liquidity, you know, we
Yeah.
need that saving. You want more in savings because in case emergencies happen, you want to have that cash flow on hand because at the end of the day, cash is king.
Yeah.
If you run into a big expense and you have nothing in savings, you're going to have a big problem on your hand.
Yeah, it really comes down to control as well. So a lot of people that we've worked with who start these accounts at first are like, oh, I don't know. I'm just used to having it in my checking. It just feels
Yeah,
like it's easier for me. I can control it there. I can able to move it out when I need to. But in reality, it's all just meshed into one account. And yes, it's there for you if you need it. But at the same time, if you're there and you don't need it, but you want it for something that maybe you really won't want to be spending it on the next day or the next week,
yeah,
it's still there for you to be tempted. Now, I'm not saying it's
yeah,
a temptation thing, but if this wealth building account's in place for you, it's still your account. So
yeah,
you still have complete control over it. But if the checking account is low and you want to go out to the friends on the weekend or you want to go out and, get drinks with the girls, that's still fine because you have the money. But now it becomes a conscious choice. I have to move money out of my savings because the money I moved in my checking is just a little short. I paid all my bills. I forgot I had this one thing. I still want to go out. Do I move that money? And it becomes a choice. Now, some
yeah,
people think, oh, it's annoying. I have to move this money, but really, it's just making you consciously aware of it. And it's
yeah,
really giving you more options. It's giving you more freedom in what you do with your money versus having it all in one system in one account. And now it's
yeah,
just mesh, and there's really no
yeah,
way to measure that.
yeah. And one of the things how we kind of label that when you have that money sit in your checking account is this propensity to spend. You
Correct.
see money, you spend money. If
Yeah.
I'm looking at I see, oh, I'm passing by a store, I want that. I see my bank account, oh, I have enough to get it. I'm gonna run in there and now buy this.
Yeah. It's human nature,
Yeah,
propensity to consume. And Matt, you can click that. You
yeah,
can just see what this looks like. So this is our income, right? Earning
yeah,
about 4%, increases with our pay raises ideally each year.
yeah,
And with our propensity to consume, it follows very closely. I mean, if we
yeah,
see 4% more money going into our checking account, most likely we're going to see more money, more things to spend on.
yeah.
I can go on that
And we
vacation.
yeah, we saw this in that calculator the second calculator we are looking at where it had the 4% expenses going up and the 4% income, dual income going up. You see that, and we netted out that 566.
Yeah. So you see why there's not much of a difference there. But if you're able to even save just 1% of that pay raise that you receive, it does become exponential in the long run. And you'll see here the 3%. So we'll have that propensity to increase your spending. Obviously, things get more expensive with inflation over time. So it takes that into
And
account.
as you're making more money, obviously, we understand we're all human. We're making more, we're probably gonna spend more.
Yeah, you want your
And
lifestyle
we
to be
want you to
better.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, but the conscious awareness of maybe just saving that 1 extra% of the 4% pay increase you got, it has tremendous effects in the long run.
And so to kind of go back to putting numbers to everything, I don't know why. There we go. What's she doing? Having some technical difficulties.
Same cash flows and concepts. Oh no, you're definitely right.
Yeah, trying to, might have to.
I
Wow.
got botted out. And we were doing so
We were
well.
doing so good. And for some reason, they wanted to bust us. Oh, and LBS shuts down.
Is it actually? It's LBS.
Let's see. There we go. We're back in. Okay. You got to see a little bit extra features of what LBS can do, that little balance
There you
sheet.
go. Do you want to? Should we go back to the other one and like retransition over to this? Do you think, or should we just maybe we just go back and be like, all right, so we now we looked at this. Let's see what this looks like in a real world example. Because we can probably use most of what we said. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I think you can go here and just be like, all right, so let's
Yeah.
look at
So, we talk about this 1% shape, and now we want to, we're talking about putting numbers to everything, putting the data there, and what that kind of looks like now with the numbers of having that 1%.
right. So here's our old example. We have 30 years with a 5% conservative rate of return. We have Mr. and Mrs. Net Income still earning their $100,000, still burning 95,000 of it with the 5% savings. As you see,
Zoom in a little bit.
the increase is the same for the income and the lifestyle, so they're not saving anything additional. And we're at the 566,000 to retire with. Still not good. Still want to increase that. So this is what happens. Actually, I'll let you guess. What do you think this looks like if we
This
have them save just 1% of their pay raise each year? So you get paid 4% increase each year. And instead, you say, you know what? I get it. My lifestyle needs to improve with my earnings. Let me improve my lifestyle 3% for each time I get this 4% rate.
So I get to save that extra dollar
The 1%.
every time.
Yeah. How much of an impact do you think this really makes? There's no increase in rate of return, no increase on the duration of time. It's just the 1% savings
We'll give you a few seconds to kind of think about that before we pop these numbers up and see how impactful that this could be. And, as we went back to that rate of return, even getting that high rate of return, remember, on the last calculator, it still was under 1 million. And by just being more conscious of our rate of savings and saving more money, it had that bigger effect. This is a similar concept. And so what that's going to look like, just 1% nets you out 1.87, almost $2 million.
Yeah. So maybe I can't get the boat, but I could certainly still at least retire
Yeah.
with some comfort knowing that should be all right. At least for, at least for the most part, most people.
Yeah.
But at any point, it's better than what we had before exponentially. So really, this just demonstrates the savings. If you can just increase the savings, no matter how you do it, if it's a strategy you put in place, if it's the WBA concept you put in place, if it's just having your own strategy, any way that you could have a process of putting savings away in the long term, it will help you reach your retirement goals and your personal goals for money much, much quicker.
Yep. And it's going to be much more, you're going to feel a lot better. It's going to be a much safer way. You don't have to focus on chasing these big market returns that a lot of times you're not going to be able to achieve. You're not going to have to deal with all that stress that might come along with that.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot more ease of life moving through time, understanding that you always have this cash flow on hand, being able to tackle any, emergency or unexpected event that might come up through time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that really concludes what the episode is, but how can we put this into practice? How can we put some real life examples to this? And you can probably stop sharing. So advice for, conclusion in all this, feel free to reach out to us if you want to discuss more about the wealth building account and what that looks like and how you put that into practice. It's worked wonders for all of our clients. Me and Matt both personally use it as well.
Yep.
It's tremendous. It's really just happens behind the scenes for you. I check it regularly and you just see how much builds up in there without you having to do anything. So it's great. So we advise something along the lines of a WBA account or a process similar to that. If you're a big credit card spender, have a process where you're paying that back at a regular frequency, making sure